just tell your client to make a website with ChatGPT. Good luck. They're not going to know what to do with the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, Bootstrap, everything like that. They're not going to know. They're not going to know. Hack the Pentagon. 36 hours straight stint I spent hacking. And that was how I used cybersecurity to go and propose to my fiance over in Japan. My fiance's brother-in-law is a sergeant cop. Remember, I've only been doing this for a year, man.
Hello, everyone. We've got Derek Sneddon here today for our cybersecurity podcast as part of the Cydef Cybersecurity Club. My name is Devesh. I'm the founder of the Cybersecurity Society here at Plaksha. And I'll just hand over the stage to Derek to give a brief intro about himself. Then we'll get started.
So my name is Derek Sneddon. I am the Utah Tech University Cybersecurity Student Association president. I will be graduating with my bachelor's degree in computer science with a minor in information technology, and I'm an ethical hacker and avid CTF player.
Thanks a lot for that, Sneddon. So I came across your profile because my dear friend Shikhar forwarded me this profile and he was like, dude, I found this crazy guy on LinkedIn and I think you're going to love him. And as soon as I heard that, he set up a podcast with you and here we are. The first thing I wanted to know is what got you interested in cybersecurity?
All right. So basically, I was working as a software developer right about a year ago. Actually, March was my 1-year hacking anniversary since I got into hacking. But I was working as a software developer. I was working as in research and development, and I found out very quickly that I did not enjoy the work as much as I thought I was going to. And so after leaving that job, I kind of had a little bit of a crisis for my career where I was like, what am I going to do? Like, I want to be happy with myself, right? But I like tech, but I don't like just developing for money. I don't want that. I want to do something good. So what ended up happening was I watched an episode of South Park where they hacked the Pentagon. And I was like, I want to try that. Like, I want to see if I could do it. Not actually do it, but see if I could do it. So I just started Googling stuff and I just got my hands dirty. And then one thing led to another. And then I started helping other people out with security. I started bounty hunting. I started playing tons of CTFs, and that was that.
That's a great story, dude. So
thank you.
You mentioned that you were working as a software engineer, right? And I'm guessing the money would also be good for someone like you. So at what point, like, what was your breaking point? Like, did you just stop enjoying it? Because I'm guessing you got into software development because you liked it at one point.
So basically, there was some situations at a company I was working at that led me to realize that I'm just writing code to just make someone else money. That's it. And I might be getting money, but in the end, they're getting a lot more than me, which is fine. It's a business. I get that. However, I realized that I wanted to do something where I was actively helping people. And I figured that protecting their information, making sure the bad guys can't get in, stuff like that would be an excellent approach to it and give me a lot more life satisfaction. Plus, I just love hacking stuff. It's just fun.
I mean, who doesn't love breaking stuff?
I know.
So you quit your software development job and you took on a career where you actually break software.
Yep, that's correct. I still make software. I built 3 CTFs very recently, and they were really fun to build. I still make software, but now I do it with a purpose.
Okay, right. Perfect. And I'm guessing CDF has a lot more fun also into it because you also have to think about how the other guy would approach it, where you want to like booby trap stuff, you want to put in a funny message or something like that. So I'm guessing you enjoyed that stuff much more.
Oh, I loved it.
Perfect. So that's how you got into cybersecurity. Now, what was the first thing you Googled once you like took a look at that hacking scene? Because I think a lot of people are getting started in cybersecurity after looking at those hacking scenes.
Okay, so hacking is, especially for people who've never touched it before, I'm sure you've seen this, is like seems really mystical and magical, right? right? Like everyone has an idea of what it is, but it's not, they don't really truly understand that it's just a skill like programming or even woodworking. It's something that you learn, right? And so I didn't even realize this at the time. I was just like, I'm going to do whatever I can. I'm going to figure it out. So I just Googled how to hack. That's literally all I Googled. And I was clicking on so many links. I was like, somewhere, somewhere, somewhere. And eventually I ran into Hack the Box. And
Hmm.
then I kept trying and failing on those live machines. You know what I'm talking about? And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so I just kept trying and failing and failing. And then eventually I found Hack the Box Academy. And then I actually picked it up a little bit, went back, solved my first box. And that was a big deal to me. And then from there, I just kept studying.
That's great, dude. So on Hack the Box, even that was the first platform that I tried. And before that, all I could find was blog posts. There was no actual platform where I could test my hacking. The most I could find was Hub, where you had to set up your VM and run it on your local computer. And at that time, I was running a floppy i3 machine with a integrated graphics card. So my first hurdle was actually installing Kali on my laptop because that had all the tools and Windows did not support it at all. So on Hack the Box, how recently did you discover Hack the Box? Because the academy is fairly new. Because when I first discovered Hack the Box, it was just boxes. Then came King of the Hill, and then we had the academy. So was it really recent, like in the
Yeah,
COVID
it
time?
was it was March of 2022.
Oh, nice. And you're already in
And
top 800.
yeah, that's right. And
That's crazy.
uh, then I've mainly played in Try Hack Me right now. I haven't played in Hack the Box for some time. I once made top 500 in Hack the Box, but
Oh,
my score has dropped. So I've reflected that on my profile. But with Try Hack Me, I've really focused my efforts on there. And so now I'm in the top 3,000, and they've got a bigger audience and a bigger platform. And so I've really dialed in on that. And it's fun to bounce between both. I recommend you do. And then, of course, Vuln Hub as well. You brought that up. So that's currently where I stand on CTFs.
that's great, dude. Do you also like participate in CTF competitions?
I do as much as I can. You'd actually be surprised. They don't really exist down where I live. And so that's why I've been making them. So I guess I don't participate, but I do host them.
Perfect. That's great, dude. So when you started Hack the Box or wherever you started, let's say you stuck at a problem. You've given a target IP. You run do your basic stuff. You run your Nmaps. You look at the web server, different ports, and all of that, and you're stuck. You have no clue what else to do.
Yep.
So, what sort of resources do you look at? How do you approach that? How do you get over that?
So the number one thing I can probably recommend is to study. So for a while I did DevOps. So I understood like the software lifecycle. There's the hacker lifecycle, right? And it starts with reconnaissance, right? I know you
Right.
know all this because you have your CEH and your OSCP, and I'm really impressed. But you start off with reconnaissance, and reconnaissance is so important. You can't skip it, right? And so when you get a weird Nmap result, you got to look it up. All right. The number one thing is Google it, right? You got to look it up. You got to understand it. And if you don't understand your fundamentals and you're not Googling along the way, I'm working with a lot of Windows machines right now, and Windows is tough as nails. You got to look it up. You don't understand it, don't skip it. Look it up first, make sure you get it, and then proceed. That's
Right,
how I
right.
start figuring things out. And then naturally, the ability to exploit them will come to you.
Perfect, perfect. So you started off with the easy boxes, you moved on to medium. And one thing I noticed in Hack the Box boxes is that some machines are just absurd. Like the level of complexity that they have, and it's not intuitive at all. I get to know that once I look at the blog post once it's retired. So how do you like is does it come to you from intuition over time, or is it something that you just get lucky with?
Yes. Yes to both. I've got to think about this question. So when I was doing, there was a summer I got into hacking, and there was a summer between my junior and senior year. My fiance knows all about this, where all I would do during that summer was hack. There was one 36-hour straight stint I spent hacking because I had no
Wow.
school. And I did have a job, but it was on my day off. And so I spent about 36 hours at my desk just going at it. And so one of the things I learned is that if you're not getting lucky and you don't have the intuition, stick with it. And
Mm.
then I surrounded myself with really smart people, smarter than me, who were able to help me and like give me a little bit of hints and guidance. The Discord community on Hack the Box was great. Try Hack Me Discord were great. Like, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't ask for spoilers, but don't be afraid to ask for help. And be patient. You've got all the time in the world to be the world's greatest hacker. So might as well take a little time being the world's best beginner hacker and understanding everything as it comes to you.
Yeah, that's a great outlook on that. So you had a 36-hour hacking session non-stop. And typically, one of the things when I start my hacking streak is that I suffer through burnout a lot. Like, if I'm stuck at a problem, I've also tried the Discord communities. And sometimes the guys just don't give you the solutions or even nudge you in the right direction. Or maybe just someone's not online. I've gotten to a point where I've gotten so fed up of hacking that I just stopped hacking, deleted my credentials on HTV, and got back on it 2 days later.
Yeah.
So how do you
So,
battle burnouts on that?
okay. My number one tip with burnout, there's one thing you'll notice if you look at like my Hack the Box profile or like my Try Hack Me profile, is that I have so many rooms and machines that are uncompleted. So many. I don't just like sit there and do one. That's way too hard. Okay. I sit there, I do one, and then I get as far as I can. And then I mess up and I try and try and try, and then I move on to a different one. I try that one, try and try and try. Maybe I get one flag out of two, and then I move on. I basically bounce between whatever I'm working on. And that prevents a lot of burnout. But on top of that, I also make sure to take breaks. The 36-hour hacking marathon I did was not healthy. I don't recommend it. However, um, I instead recommend, take breaks. Like, I don't mean just go play a video game. I mean, like, go outside. I know that's a foreign concept to most hackers, including me, but I love to run, and then I'll go like weightlifting with my fiance. Like, do something physical, do something that's not on a computer, and that will help you a lot and will clear up your head. And usually, when you're exercising or doing something else, you'll think of the solution.
Right, right.
The real hacking happens outside of the computer.
Damn, that's very insightful. So that's for Hack the Box. What sort of projects are you currently working on? Because when I started out, I was a total script kiddie, like everyone was starting out, and I was like stuck in that tutorial hell where I had to look up each and everything. I just used to search for scripts, mainly exploit DB and SQL map. But after that, I got the hang of it and got moving on. Now I always had the motivation to start a project in cybersecurity. Like if there's already a tool for that, I would be like, "Nee, I want to do it myself. I I'll do it myself." And then I start coding it up. Halfway through that, I'll realize this is very, very unnecessary, and I'll quit. So I'm guessing you've also been working on some projects like these. What sort of projects are you working on right now in the cybersecurity space?
That's a good question. If you were to ask me a week ago, I would have told you a billion different things. But because those CTFs that I was writing for my senior project wrapped up, I'm now transitioning. That was really intensive on my time. I probably spent about 200 hours writing them. So now I'm kind of just relaxing a little bit. We talked about burnout, right? Well, last week was one of my most intense development sessions and testing sessions I think I've ever had. So I'm just going to relax a little bit. I recently got myself, I don't know if you'll show the camera on the podcast, but I recently got myself a Flipper Zero,
Yeah,
those
yeah, I
bad
saw that.
boys. And so I am currently just messing with people, but not unethically, of course.
Got it, got it.
That's a tip. If you're getting into cybersecurity, you have to know the laws. But one good guarantee is that if you're gonna mess with anyone, don't mess with anyone who can prosecute you. Don't
Got
mess
it,
with a
got it.
business. Don't mess with someone that you think has money. Mess with your friends and family, but do so safely, do so nicely, and don't be a jerk about it. So right now, I've just been playing around with wireless hacking and then doing the occasional CTF. I'll pick up some more projects soon, but that's where I'm at right now.
Got it, got it. So we definitely need to stay ethical on that, as long as it fits
Yes.
our definition. So were there any instances where you were like caught, quote unquote caught, where you wounded up somewhere you weren't supposed to be?
Well, I'm trying to figure out how to answer that. There was one time that I was getting really acclimated with I was getting acclimated with OSINT and open source intelligence. And there's two kinds, right? There's active and there's passive, right? So passive is when you don't connect to the target, when you don't speak with the target, you just look up things about the target. It's like just Google searching someone. But active is when you actively send packets to the target, when you actively talk to them, anything of that nature. Now, legal OSINT is passive, but start throwing in activity in there, and it can become illegal very quickly. So I was messing around with OSINT. I was getting really curious, and I was running some OSINT scripts I found, and they were all passive as far as I knew. And then there was one point where I was right about to run one that basically was like a directory fuzzer, right? But it was a really intensive one. It was a bit more just fluff, and it also searched for things based on web scraping results. And I realized before I hit enter that I was like, wait a minute, this is active, not passive. Like, what is it doing? It's sending all these packets. What is going on? And there are moments I've never, for my own legal safety, of course, there are moments where I've caught myself. It's important to just be vigilant about it, just know about it. And then if somebody actually does catch you, be cooperative with them, explain what was going on, explain that you had no malicious intent. And so long as you didn't, you'll probably be just fine. Just
Right.
don't actively look for trouble. CTFs are good for that, not the real world without authorization.
Right, right. I think you put up a really good point there about keeping yourself in check. Because once you get started, it's really easy to get lost and just go with the flow. If you find an entry point, it's hard to stop yourself from just going ahead, exploring more, how far you could get, what sort of information you could get access to. So I think it's really important to keep yourself in check. And apart from this, were there any legal actions taken against you ever for crossing the
No,
limits?
I've had people get curious. My my fiance's brother-in-law is a sergeant cop, and so
Oh.
I definitely wouldn't want to mess with him. He's a great guy. He's a wonderful guy. I really like him, but I definitely wouldn't want to mess with him. I have never had any form of legal action taken on me, but I've also been very careful. You got to be a little stringent about it. One
Right.
thing you'll feel when you get into this is you will get people who legitimately ask you if you can hack this. And you could probably say, maybe, but I don't want to.
Right,
And you
right.
have to be strict about that. You have to take that seriously. You have to be careful because at least in the United States, you can get locked in federal prison for 10 years if you are doing illegal hacking. That's a very punishing crime. You don't want to be on the other side of that. So if you get into this, realize it's super fun, it's super cool, you'll love it, super satisfying. But make sure that when you start hacking, you know what you're hacking and you know you have permission to do so.
Right, right. Got it, got it. On the point of people asking you to hack this, hack that, I'm sure you've received absurd requests. I need a Instagram account hack. It's for a friend. People are impersonating him. I need this Gmail hack. Can you do this? Can you do that? I'll pay you this much. So, on that note, what are some of the misconceptions do you feel are there in cybersecurity industry right now? Like, if you see a movie, it's not at all realistic. What are some of the misconceptions do you feel are there?
So most movies, I want to clarify. Actually, it's kind of funny you brought this up because I did act in a movie once. That was
Oh,
fun.
wow.
Yeah, it was just a little budget film, but they had a lot of questions, and I wasn't a hacker back then, so I tried to answer them the best I could. But one thing I've realized is the movies aren't that far off. As much as it might seem they're completely mystical, they're not that unrealistic. A lot of the attacks they do in the movies can happen and have happened in real life. The couple key differences, everyone knows that pretty much at this point that pen testing is a legitimate career, so I don't need to get into that. But one of the key misconceptions that can happen between the movies and real life is how long it takes. An exploit doesn't take a 2-minute scene. That's like if you want to spin your computer up, it takes 2 minutes.
Right.
You know, these things can take hours to days to months. Some of the biggest cyber attacks they've had year-long reconnaissance uh, periods of time where they just study. SolarWinds was a big deal. Well, SolarWinds was a
Mm,
big example of that, where Russian hackers just studied SolarWinds for over a year, and they didn't even exploit anything. And then when they exploited everything, everything came crashing down. So one of the biggest misconceptions is how much time it takes.
right, right. Even if you've seen the series Mr. Robot,
Oh, I
I
love that
think that's
series.
a really good example of accurate hacking, I'd say. But even in
Yes.
those scenes, the scene where Elliot presses the enter button on their hack script where it encrypts all of ECOP's data, uh, the amount of time it takes to create a script like that, to find a backdoor, to plant a backdoor, and it's it could be years and months, and all they show is just a script, an enter key pressing on their computer. So I think that's where a lot of misconceptions come from. But yeah, I definitely agree, some of these movies are very, very close to actual hacking.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's actually kind of funny is that Elliot in Mr. Robot is able to write regular expressions from his memory. I have to Google them every single time. And I saw him, he was writing a script and he was like pumping out this like 2-line regular expression. And
Right,
I'm like,
right.
what are you doing, dude? Like, how are you not Googling this? Like, I have to Google it to get like 4 characters out. It was funny. It was really cool.
Yeah, it's absolutely absurd, dude. What do you feel are the most misconfigured technologies out there? What have you encountered to be the most misconfigured technologies? It might also be a Google Doc exposed page.
Okay, so the number one way to find exposed tech is Shodan, the search
Hmm.
engine. What
Right,
it
right.
does is it queries every IP address possible and tries to identify what it is. And that specifically gets into IoT devices, smart cameras. It's really not that hard to remote in to someone's camera if they didn't lock it down correctly. It's really easy. You could just pull it up right now. I could do that right now. And that's one of the biggest concerns that you should have is when you buy a small device with a computer inside it. They're hard to patch. They're not built with security in mind, and yet for some reason they're really easy to exploit. There was a case down close to where I live where they exploited a casino through a fish tank feeder.
Oh, wow.
The attackers actually got into the fish tank feeder and pivoted from there all the way to the top. And it was mind-boggling. And it kind of made me realize it was like the front door is not the only entrance. Their firewall is not the only entrance. If you can get to a printer, you can get to an IoT device, you can get to a SCADA device. SCADA devices are really scary. You can get to any of those. You can often pivot to other places on the network if it's not configured right. And you can cause a ton of damage because no longer, if you're pivoting, you're no longer an outside threat. You're inside the network. And usually, if there's no zero trust architecture, that means that you can hit just about whatever you want without any notice. That's really scary.
Definitely agree. So on the point of pivoting, how do you approach a target to get to that point of, let's say a low privileged computer on a network, and you pivot through it to the DC, the domain controller. How do you approach a target? You just given a domain name, you find all the subdomains. How do you do all of that?
Well, the number one thing, as I mentioned before, is reconnaissance. Know your network before you start exploiting it. That's just critical. If you're really fresh into the hacking scene, Google everything as you go. Even if you're not really fresh, I still Google everything as I go. It's like, oh, what's this port? What is this protocol? Okay, here we go. Google it, right? You need to know their network better than you know your own. You need to become very familiar with it. Because if you were to rob a bank, you would want to know what customers go in. You would want to know who are the tellers there. You want to know when they take breaks. You want to know when does the money go in and out of the vault. You want to know when the bank closes. Don't skip those steps. Reconnaissance might seem a little boring to some people, but it's absolutely critical. And so when you're aiming to pivot, when you're aiming to escalate your privileges, you should know who you're escalating your privileges to and what machine you're pivoting onto. You should know how other machines and users perceive that device, because it can be the difference between you successfully exploiting that device and moving forward, or you getting blocked out and caught.
Right. So you mentioned reconnaissance is one of your major roles while approaching a target. How do you perform a recon for some domain? For let's say I give you a domain xyz.com. How would you perform reconnaissance on that? That's the starting
So,
point.
okay, so what I first start recommending doing is just passive OSINT. Just start with that passive reconnaissance. Just keep it chill, keep it mellow, because it's like you're invading another country, but you're blindfolded, right? All you know is the country's name, right? And you're just walking over, or would you just walk over to the DMZ and get shot? No, you wouldn't. You don't want to
Right.
do that, right? You need to know just how they're perceived. You need to know what are they like on LinkedIn. Go to Whois, look them up. Start with anything that's publicly accessible that a customer or a prospecting client would look up. Start there. That's a really good spot to start. And then once you start getting comfortable and you start seeing like, okay, they might have this, they might have that, then you could start kicking it up a couple notches and doing some lighter reconnaissance. And you can kind of slowly assess and build a report of that network. You're getting to know it. Think of it like you're going on a date. You want to get to know them before you
Right.
do anything weird. Okay. And you want them to feel comfortable with you. They might not even know about you, but you still want them and you to feel comfortable. And then you can start kicking it up a notch. I don't start port scanning until I know who they are. I know who they are first. CTFs, you just put nmap in and you give the IP address and you start going. But that's a CTF. In the real world, you need to know who they are. And you need to know that if their security is locked down tight, maybe doing a typical nmap scan is going to get you blacklisted. That's the type of information you would look for. So as far as reconnaissance, just start slow. Get to know them before you start doing anything. That's my number one piece of advice.
Okay. Got it. So what sort of time would you say you allocate to a reconnaissance stage? In percentage, what would you say that's that?
So how much time?
So let's say you've done pen testing a target. Would you spend 10%, 20% of your time on reconnaissance? Or would it be much higher, 50, 60%?
I wouldn't put a hard time limit on it. I would just say until you think you know.
Okay, got it.
Okay. If you feel like something's off, learn about it. If you feel like something is weird, learn about it. Don't leave it unturned. Now, obviously, you got to get to exploiting eventually, right? But reconnaissance is just something you should constantly be doing. After you exploit, you move up in the system. You should start doing reconnaissance again,
Hmm.
right? Okay. You just move through it systematically. You move through it. I've gotten to the point where it's almost all muscle memory, what I look up, what I do. You want to get to that point and just get to where you feel like you're comfortable, then move on. Because if you don't exploit, well, if you start exploiting before you do your reconnaissance, you can throw away the whole operation and you won't be doing it in a skilled manner. So do it until you're comfortable, probably honestly like a day, a full day, or to do a week-long penetration testing.
Got
Give it
it.
a full day and then move on.
So learn about it. That's the main point. I've burned that in my brain right now.
Yeah.
So you were talking about reconnaissance. Just to recap a little, you were talking about reconnaissance, how would you would approach a target, and the number one thing you feel is that anything weird or anomalous we see, we should just Google it and see how it works. Understand the target first before even chucking in an Nmap scan. So that's the knowledge that you have at this stage. But let's say a beginner, not everyone would be able to see this video, and they beginners don't even know what sort of resources to go, what sort of resources to approach. How do you make the most of a resource? What would you say takes a person from a beginner to an expert like yourself?
So the number one thing is that you got to be a little bit humble. It's really easy to show off to your hacking friends and family. Well, show your hacking off to your friends and family and show them how cool you are. But I assure you that if you're by yourself and you boot up a hard CTF, you're going to get stuck and you're going to feel awful. So something I feel constantly is imposter syndrome, where you don't feel like you belong where you belong, right? You don't feel like you belong with the skills, right? And that is something I battle all the time, right? So the number one key thing that I recommend is to constantly recognize that you're always learning. You're always going to be a beginner somewhere, and that's okay. You don't have to feel insecure about it. You don't need to have the imposter syndrome over it. That's okay. Everyone is learning constantly. This is a field that's constantly evolving. So if you try to simply say that, oh, I'm an expert and I don't need to learn anything else, you're going to get stuck. But if you just say, I'm constantly learning, and you take it with that approach, you get curious. And if you don't know something, that's okay. I don't know a lot of things. I want to learn Rust and I know a little bit of Go, but I'm not really good at those programming languages, but I want to learn them. So I'm just giving them a try, right? Take it with
Right.
that approach instead. Now, the key thing is what's going to separate you from a beginner in my eyes from an expert, quote unquote, is whether or not you are running scripts blindly. If you understand what you're doing before you do it, I consider you skilled. If you are willing to find it out, I consider you skilled. If you're
Right.
not, and you are simply just trying to run whatever you can, you're a script kiddie, you're a beginner. You need to start learning how to learn. So your ability in cybersecurity is not all the protocols you know, all the exploits you know, it's your ability to learn.
Got
And the
it.
better you get at learning, the better expertise I think you have.
Right, right. Got it. So you'd say the hunger for curiosity is what separates a beginner from an expert.
Yes. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Again, back on learning. Burn that in my brain right now. So let's say there's a guy called Devesh. He wants to start a career in cybersecurity. He's a complete beginner. Uh, and he's at a stage where he needs to get a job in cybersecurity. He doesn't have time to hone his skills for a year or two. what would you recommend? What sort of certifications would you recommend? What sort of resources would you recommend to a complete beginner who wants to land a good job in the cybersecurity space?
Sure thing. So the Sec Plus is a certification I hold, the Security Plus CompTIA, and that's got me in the door and no further. I just have to be honest. I think certifications, with a couple exceptions like the OSCP, which I'm going after now, are a bit overrated. I think if you have the Sec Plus, Server Plus, Linux Plus, all those things, they're not going to care that much. Now, however, I think if you have CTF experience, that was the number one thing that I've noticed out in my clients and out the places I've worked in cybersecurity that they point out is my CTF experience. It separates me out from my competition because not all the competition goes for CTFs. They often will go for certs.
Right.
They'll recognize that as practical experience because that means that you've gotten dirty with the field. You haven't just answered multiple choice questions. So if you were to try and kickstart your career into cybersecurity, I'd highly recommend that you pick up a base level security certification like the Security Plus. And then after that, focus on CTFs, get practical experience, become skilled. You don't necessarily need the badge on your name. You need to be skilled. And CTFs will prove that.
So before you got the Security Plus, did you already have secured CTF experience?
I had some CTF experience, yes. But so actually, funny story, if you're okay with that. So my fiance was living in Japan and I was here in the United States and she was studying abroad. Now I wanted to propose to her and I had no money. I was broke, man. I was out, right? And I'm a starting college student. I'm just trying to make it work. Well, I find out there's an opportunity if I can make the money to go and propose to her, right? I love this
Right.
girl. I love her more than anything. Okay. And she's awesome and she's a brilliant programmer. But I'll tell you what, I needed to make the money. You're in that position. So, well, I didn't have my Security Plus back then. I had to make it work. And so I picked up just about any gig I could. I fixed people's computers. I pulled out malware out of it. I was learning the whole time while I was doing it. Yeah, I was doing CTF experience, but I also was getting bug bounty hunting experience in the meantime. And I was just scraping together the money, right? And so the number one thing I can recommend, and I was still new to cybersecurity at this point. I had like 3, 4, 5 months of experience, right? I was still kind of fresh. And it was just, I spent so much time just getting curious. And then eventually people started paying me. That's kind of crazy. And in the very end, I was able to fly up to Japan and propose to my fiance with the money I made, scraping together just any form of gigs I could. So, like, if you want to get into cybersecurity, you don't have to have a 9 to 5 job. I didn't. You
Right.
could just start with the Google bounty program. Just message people. I got in touch with several mentors. Just talk to people. And that was how I used cybersecurity to go and propose to my fiance over in Japan.
Got it. Got it. So I'm guessing at that time you were not suffering from any sort of burnout because you had that motivation in you. I need to get to Japan. I need to propose to her.
Yeah, well, it was hard. It was really hard because I was also juggling school at the same time and I was
Hmm.
juggling work. And it was very, very difficult. I also was trying to keep it a surprise. So she would see me on video calls and I was like so tired, because I've been doing hacking, right? And she
Right.
kept asking, and I was like, nope, we're all good. All right, thanks, honey. We're totally fine, right? But I was very motivated. I had a very good motivation, but sometimes your motivation doesn't have to come from a pretty girl overseas. That is a pretty good one, but it doesn't have to be. It
Got
can be
it.
the motivation of you simply wanting to help people. That's a big one for me. And bringing them the assurance that they're safe because cyber criminality is a huge problem now. And if you get into this field, understand that the moment you start working in cybersecurity, you are helping people. And that should make you feel really good about yourself. Not something to brag about super hard, maybe like I am right now, but it should make you feel so good. And I'll tell you, doing good like that is the most rewarding feeling in the world. And that is why I love cybersecurity and why I think anyone should at least give it a try, because you will feel smart, you'll feel awesome, and you'll do good.
So the ability to help people is what's driving you to pursue a career in cybersecurity.
Yes.
Was money ever a part of it?
I was going into software engineering, and money was my initial reason that I went into software engineering and computer science. And I realized that money is important to pay the bills and you need to make a good amount for sure. And I 100% agree with that. But it's not everything, at least not to me. Because one day I'm going to be on my deathbed. And just like all of us, we're all going to the grave one day. And we're going to have to look back at our lives and ask if we did good, if we did something that helped the world. And that is why I love cybersecurity, is because I know I won't regret it. I know that I'll be able to go into this field and help as many people as I can and do awesome things. And then when my time is up, I'll feel good about it. So money will come with this career. If you're going into cybersecurity, you're going into a hard field, you're going into a technical one, and you're going into one that's very in demand. Just know that the money will be there if you keep at it and don't let anyone gyp you. But if you're in this for the money, I'm sorry, but you're probably not built for cybersecurity. You should be in it to help people secure their networks and protect them.
Got it, got it. You really inspired me to like change my outlook on cybersecurity. Because very recently, I think last year, when the whole Web3 bull market was going on, we saw a
Yeah.
lot of smart contract hacks, $600 million, $500 million. The estimated loss was on the order of $10 billion. So when I looked at all of that, I was like, everyone's making money. Why am I not able to make any money here?
Yeah.
So that's where I separated from doing it for interest and doing it for money. But yeah, I definitely agree. Money can only take you so far. In the end, what matters is what you've been doing. I'm sure you've heard of OpenAI's ChatGPT, and I'm guessing you also used it.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
after the release of ChatGPT, has your methodologies changed, mutated in ways in which you integrate ChatGPT?
Yes and no. ChatGPT kind of released right at the beginning of my adventure into cybersecurity. Remember, I've only been doing this for a year, man. Like, I've been going crazy at it and I love it. I've been doing it pretty much every waking hour. I try to do like 30 to 4 hours of CTFs every day. That's just a big thing with me. I try to get a daily routine. But use it with caution. Use it as an excellent way to look up documentation. It's an excellent reference. It cannot replace you. It cannot replace you fixing bugs. It cannot replace you when things go wrong. So use it very actively. Use it and pay attention. I use it primarily to like, I've never seen this before. What is this protocol? What is this service? And then I just type in ChatGPT. I look it up. It parses through documentation and gives me results. It is an excellent library. I do not recommend learning programming by copy and pasting ChatGPT results onto your editor. I recommend getting in there dirty yourself. But if you understand it and you need something quick, ChatGPT is a great tool for that. It's a tool. Use it responsibly. Don't skip out on the learning process, because eventually you'll run into something that ChatGPT won't be able to explain. I know that sounds mystical, but remember that ChatGPT is only updated to, I believe, 2021. maybe even 2019. It doesn't know the brand newest exploits, 0 days, vulnerabilities. It probably doesn't even know about prompt injections, which are new with AI. It probably doesn't even know what that is. So you've got to be the one to find it. So don't let it replace your skill.
Right, right. So funny you mentioned prompt injection. Actually, that was something I was studying recently. And leading on to our next question, we're seeing all these sites integrate AIs into the backend. It might be for tutor, it might be for customer support. How do you think new attacks are going to get formulated in that aspect? One, we've got prompt engineering, obviously. Could you explain that a bit?
So prompt injections, if I heard your question right, is like how is AI going to change the cybersecurity landscape? Is that right?
Correct.
Right. So I think of prompt injections like social engineering with LFI or local file inclusion for those who don't know, or command injections. They're like a mix between social engineering and the technical. It's kind of weird because what you're essentially trying to do with prompt injections and convincing chatbots to do things they're not supposed to, including support calls and stuff, is you're trying to convince it that what it's doing, what you're telling it to do, is okay to do, when it really is against the rules, right?
Right.
So I think what it's going to do is it's just going to create a new avenue, just like social engineering, just like SQL injections, just like anything else. It will be a new way for us to get information.
Right.
For example, I know that with one of the AI chatbots, that there was a guy who just simply convinced the bot that it was going to die unless it dumped out the contents of its database. Right? I can't remember which one it was, but I remember hearing about that. And it's just a new method of doing what we already do. We do dumping with databases with SQL injections all the time. Or you can even get it done with LFI. There's a couple million different ways to do it. This is just another avenue.
Right. So this dude convinced GPT or whatever model that was running that it was going to die unless it dumped the entire database. And why was the model given access to the database in the first place?
Well, think about it this way. The model's got to have access to its own database. There might be degrees and tiers of how much it has access to, but it's got to have access to something, right?
Right.
In order to answer the questions, it's got to query the database and it's got to figure out through its algorithm how to respond, right? So the idea would be, even though it might not be your crown jewels, as you might say, it still is something that you can work with if you're an attacker. You might as well get to know the system. This goes back to reconnaissance, man. I know I talk about it and maybe I beat it with like a dead horse, but you do your reconnaissance. And sometimes your exploits are to do more reconnaissance. It's to learn more about it. So I can't say whether or not it would be absolutely critical that it dumped out its most immediate database full of just what it was responding with, but you could learn the schema. And then maybe from there, you can take, if you learn the schema, right? That's one of the most important steps in like SQL injection. Maybe you can mix prompt injection and SQL injection. I'm just talking theoretically right now, together to maybe do something damaging, like actually dump the database behind that, or drop the whole database and destroy it, or who knows. So all it is all I'm thinking about with prompt injection is that it's simply another vector to do what we do best already.
Right. But in this case, we're just convincing AI or an abstract
Yeah.
entity that what he's
Yep.
doing is right, and I
What
need
they're
that information.
Yeah, sorry if I misheard it, but the question, but yeah, essentially what you're doing is you're doing like what you would do with any other computer. You are convincing it that whatever it's doing is okay. You are tricking it into running code. You are tricking it into running whatever exploit. The same goes with people. With people, you're tricking them into thinking, oh, yes, I am a legitimate IT support person. It is okay that you give me your password. You are tricking them. You are getting
Got
them
it.
to do the things that they're not meant to do, but they are capable of doing.
Got it. Got it. Now, to conclude our podcast, we're going to get down to the grand question. Do you think AI would be able to replace jobs in the cybersecurity space?
My
Take
answer
your
is
time.
no. My answer is no. I don't think. Sorry, I got to think on this for a second, formulate this. I think it will replace the people who don't hack and only take certification exams, specifically non-practical certification exams.
So just MCQs and all of that.
Just multiple choice questions. I think it will replace people who just only learn and don't apply.
Got it.
I think it will replace. If you remember, you might have heard that it recently took one of the medical exams and like scored incredibly high and was able to
Mm-hmm.
diagnose multiple diseases. But do you think that would actually replace a doctor? Because the
To a
doctor
certain
has
extent, I'd say.
to a certain extent, but the doctor still has to provide a second opinion.
Right.
The doctor still has to problem solve, right? When was the last time you went on WebMD and you got an accurate diagnosis? You know, good luck, right?
Got it.
You have to have someone who's got some intuition to them, right? I think instead what we'll start seeing is we'll see ourselves as supervisors over the AI. They might do something really simple like, hey, configure these rules that will block out an attacker if they're trying to do an nmap scan. And then we'll get some sort of response, right? And we'll check for like port scanning and all of these things. And then we might see, why is it allowing port this? Why is it allowing this port that's commonly used with backdoors? That's kind of weird. And then we ourselves will provide that intuition and ability to go and adjust that and change it. And also at the end of the day, we don't have androids yet. The AI can't physically break into the system, right?
Right.
They can't be the one to hook up all the switches yet and the routers. They can't be the one to be there physically. I think we might change what our responsibilities are. I think there will be less of an emphasis on sheer knowledge and more of an emphasis on skill. And when I've done interviews with companies, they ask me what certs I have, but they're more impressed. They always follow that up with what side projects I'm doing or CTFs. And they're always more impressed with CTFs and side projects because that means you can actually apply the knowledge. So if you are scared about AI impacting this field, I highly recommend that you just make sure that you can sit down on a computer and that you can do one of these projects. You can hack a machine, you can build an IDS. You just make sure that you are skilled enough to solve the problems, and I think you'll be fine.
Hmm. So you
Does that
feel
answer
that
your question?
it does to a certain extent. So you feel AI won't be able to simulate an actual pen test for a company. Is that right?
Well, we already have vulnerability scanners. That's
Right.
pretty, but if you've learned anything about vulnerability scanners, is that they're not a replacement for a penetration test. They're a good way to overall assess the security posture of a company. They do not replace someone going in and working on it. Even if that someone is using automated systems to pen test a company, at the end of the day, they're still managing the pen test.
Got it.
Like I said, we'll be supervisors. My prediction is, I could be totally wrong, and I hope I'm not, but I think our industry is a bit safer than some of the others that AI is contending with, is that we will be supervisors to the machines and we will guide them to keep them from receiving false positives and false negatives. That is my prediction.
Got it. Got it. So you don't believe AI would have much of an impact on cybersecurity compared to other industries?
Well, I'll ask you this. If you think AI is still gonna just completely replace cybersecurity people, why are so many people still leaning hard into it? Why are CTFs still getting made? Why are people still going into it? Why
Right.
are people still asking for it? I'll tell you what, your client, who's often a business person, will not understand how to implement these solutions. That's where you come in. Even if they try, to use, just tell your client to make a website with ChatGPT. Good luck. They're not going to know what to do with the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, Bootstrap, everything like that. They're not going to know. They're not going to know. Yeah. That's
Right.
where you come in. That's where you are able to fix it and put it together. And when bugs come up, you'll repair them. That's where your expertise will be. It's not a full replacement, at least not yet. And I'm not convinced it will be, at least within our lifetimes.
Okay. Got it. Thanks a lot for that super insightful talk. We've gained a ton
Sure.
of insights. We've learned a lot. We've got a lot of resources, especially the story about your fiance. I think that should motivate a lot of cybersecurity enthusiasts. And we'd love to have you back on, but this would be it for today. Thank you, Derek, for joining in. Hope you enjoy.
Thank you so much for having me. You were fantastic.